The story is about a teenage, diligent novelist, Nogami Kei, who proudly claims to be an introvert. Currently, he stretches with delight, having finally uploaded his latest novel to the website on time, but he has kept it a secret from everyone so it does not mess with his writing. The next day, he is all tired and groggy at school when his friend haphazardly pushes him aside. This is because they have managed to cross paths with a group of rich and popular girls from the school, and he doesn't want to get in trouble with them. Thankfully, the girls pass by them peacefully, and the boys have a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, one of the girls named Houjou stops abruptly and stares at them intently. For an introvert, being noticed is usually filed under worst-case scenarios. It appears that she is eyeing Nogami with interest, arousing her friend's curiosity. But she quickly shuns her thoughts away at her friend's scornful remark, and she sneaks a peek at Nogami's picture saved in her phone. Later on her call, a panic-stricken Nogami is compelled to meet her behind the school building. Nogami is very curious about why a girl like Houjou called him over. Then Houjou shocks him by revealing his pen name, Otonashiyoma, which he had carefully kept secret. Nogami is stunned and panics when his secret is exposed. Seeing his reaction confirms Houjou's suspicion that he is the novelist who writes on that website. As Nogami gets even more nervous, Houjou happily tells him that she has discovered his identity because she is actually his biggest fan. Even her positive remarks do not straighten out his frowns as he smells a big stinky fish behind all that sweetness. He tries to dig out her real motives, but she quickly flees the scene, leaving him totally restless. On reaching home, Houjou squeals in delight at her guess about Nogami being on target. In her enthusiasm, she squeezes her stuffed toys hard pertaining to being able to meet her favorite author. But despite her insane admiration for him, she has decided to lock her feelings in her heart so that he doesn't catch any wrong ideas. Meanwhile, Nogami is still paranoid about being discovered by Houjou, and he shudders on recalling that eerie smirk on her face. He horror-strickenly imagines himself getting blackmailed by her since she belongs to the elite class that overpowers the whole school. She is infamous for treating people like puppets, taking advantage of their weaknesses for her own advantage. He can picture himself being toyed with for his work and then imagines himself becoming a laughing stock in front of the whole school. His anxiety gets the better of him since he sadly suffers from writer's block on his next submission date. On the other hand, Houjou is desperately waiting for his next part and becomes quite anxious when it doesn't happen. Her anxiety is so evident that even her personal maid gets concerned about her. The author has writer's block, the fan has reader's block. Nobody is winning. Houjou claims to be his dedicated fan who wants to precede everyone in reading his latest update. To her dismay, he posts a brief message about his inability to upload the new update due to an issue. Unconsciously, Houjou curses that source of trouble without realizing that she is the one who caused that. The next day, an adamant Nogami decides to have a firm talk with her to break that block. Soon, he calls her to their same meeting place, where she arrives aloofly. He hesitantly brings up the subject of the novel website and indirectly probes her whether she has kept his secret safe. She honestly blurts out about her maid being the third person to know. Poor Nogami is devastated, thinking that now his secret will spread like wildfire. Mustering up his courage, he nervously requests that she not share his secret with others since even his own friends are unaware of it. She stares at him in a stupor when he humbly requests that she keep it between the two of them. She throws him a quick affirmation and then turns away to leave. The following night, Houjou tosses and turns in joy at being given such an honor by her favorite author. The maid pops in at the wrong time, bursting her dream by emphasizing that she is the partner in secret as well. Houjou yells at her by addressing her with her real name, Yuko Yoshida, and sending her out of the room. Simultaneously, Nogami is typing furiously on his laptop, relieved to be temporarily out of trouble. Still, he is surprised at being discovered like that so abruptly. He freaks out at the rapidly moving clock hands and tries to divert his attention to the latest update, which has already been delayed. However, he is quite surprised when summoned in private by Houjou the next day. She mentions his latest work that he posted last night and advises him to end it with the same finesse, showing how carefully she read his work. He is completely taken aback by her intrigue towards his work since she is providing active feedback as well. It dawns on him that things are not what he suspected them to be, and his latest thoughts push him to more confusion. Later, Houjou screams in regret for judging his work in front of him. She tosses and turns in sheer abashment, thinking about his opinion of her. A stoic Yuki is watching her silently, surprised at her mistress playing mysterious in front of Nogami, whose work she passionately follows. So, after reading his latest update for about the zillionth time, Houjou yearns for more, declaring him the perfect writer. Yoshida can sense her euphoric situation and wishes to share the same, but she finds it her duty to warn her against the pros of obsessive fandom. Houjou is confident that she is different from others and believes that Nogami might have already recognized her as his true follower. In reality, things are the opposite since Nogami fears his work being ridiculed by her. He imagines her mocking and making fun of him. He believes that, being a rich brat, she is only playing with his feelings, and that annoys him to the core. One person is planning a fan confession. The other is preparing for emotional self-defense. He decidedly slams his hands on the table, vowing not to let anyone insult his favorite hobby. On the other hand, Yoshida advises Hojo to reveal her feelings to him to get noticed. When she appears uncertain, Yoshida tries to convince her that being straightforward will definitely earn his favor or else he will end up despising her. In the end, they both plan to have a direct talk with each other. The next day, Nogami summons her first, and the latter pretends to appear irritable and indifferent. In reality, she is relieved to be rescued from the hassle of summoning him in the first place. But deep down, she is all set to reveal the truth after he is done. However, she is in for a shock when he requests that she stop belittling him for being a novelist. Suddenly, Yoshida's solemn face flashes in front of her, warning her about the probable misunderstanding. A flushed Hojo tries to reason but is harshly bitten off in the middle by his deafening caution. For a brief moment, there is a disturbing silence between the duo, and then tears begin to well up in the corners of Hojo's eyes. Nogami is puzzled, and then is about to leave after making his point clear, when out of the blue, she brings up his novel, Tenni Numuko, and begins commenting on it. A stunned Nogami freezes on his steps, and then she begins to remark on his other novel. This continues as she steps from one novel to another, increasing his astonishment at every level. She stoops on the floor and, while burying her face in her arms, continues with commentary despite his attempt to stop her. Slowly, guilt takes the better of him as he kneels on the ground and hesitantly guesses her to be his fan. Hojo sniffles and then aggressively denies that on his face. She proclaims to be unworthy to be his fan and wails even louder. Nogami is more baffled, but he still thanks her for reading his books avidly. Also, he apologizes for his previous outburst, which was a result of misunderstanding. Hojo instantly restrains him from apologizing and repeatedly uses his pseudonym Otonashi-sensei for reference. Slightly panic-stricken, he whispers to keep it low to maintain secrecy. Finally, she has calmed down a bit and appears remorseful for her misleading attitude. Nogami is left in a stupor as she slowly wipes off her tears. The secret identity has now been whispered so many times that it is barely a secret anymore. Hit by guilt once again, he frantically bows in front of her and offers his heartiest apology. Hojo is taken aback by his abrupt dojeza, but he proclaims to reflect on his actions. Seizing the opportunity, she quickly expresses her wish that he write a novel. He raises his head with uncertain eyes, so she clarifies that this time he should write a love story, since he has never tried his hand at this genre before. Poor Nogami is in a fix to be stuck with such an impossibility because he is quite uncomfortable writing love scenes. He even offers to write one without those. Hojo's face darkens with disappointment, and then she gravely reminds him of his earlier promise to do anything to make up. Out of the blue, she threatens to reveal his secret identity in public, and it sets him on fire. What follows is an ugly spat between the duo, but she puts her foot down on making him write a romantic novel. Nogami cannot believe that he has finally been tricked by Hojo just like he had feared. She flicks her hair with style and confirms whether he is ready to comply. Poor Nogami has no choice but to agree to do something that is far beyond his abilities. The next night, loud cries can be heard from Hojo's large mansion. She deeply regrets the way she treated Otonashi-sensei and believes that forcing him into that situation has made him hate her. While Hojo is overwhelmed with guilt and worry, Yoshida can only helplessly try to comfort and calm her down. Meanwhile, confusion remains the strongest relationship in the story. The next morning, Nogami is all tired and groggy in the classroom. When his friend expresses curiosity, it is revealed that he has spent the whole night trying to get done with Hojo's request. But to his dismay, he wasn't able to produce anything. Out of dejection, he slams his head again on the desk while his friend gazes at him anxiously. However, he raises his head in alarm when Hojo pops up suddenly, greeting him merrily. He stutters a weak response while his friend stands shocked at the very unusual meetup. Nothing attracts attention quite like an introvert being approached by the school's most famous girl. Ignoring his condition, she coyly reminds him of yesterday's pact, so he hesitantly expresses his inability to fulfill it. Hojo gives him a sinister stare and stands firm on her motive. To prove her point, she flashes the phone screen in front of him intimidatingly. After that, she triumphantly exits, leaving the boys in a stupor. A terrified Nogami convinces himself to attempt again or else face public ridicule. Later at home, Hojo shakes herself violently for treating him like trash despite her prime intention being to offer an apology. She miserably remembers his helplessness against her absurd request. Finally, she turns to Yoshida for advice, and as predicted, Yoshida asks her to apologize. But her advice doesn't sound feasible to Hojo, since she feels that it will further degrade her in front of him. She urges Yoshida to think of a more practical solution that will make her threats more reasonable to him. Yoshida is first perplexed by her nonsense, but then proposes to make Nogami go through a romantic experience before writing one. An excited Hojo dashes to get a romantic novel to lend him for reference. The next day, she catches him all exhausted and drained, so she wonders whether he has ever read a romance novel before. When he refutes, she lends him one for reference, claiming it to be the most epic one. She really hopes that his level of work surpasses the novel. After she has left, he anxiously checks the book out and is quite perturbed to find it to be a national treasure. Meanwhile, Hojo is jumping with joy at her own generosity, hoping to get the best out of him, but Yoshida is suspicious. A few days later, Hojo delightfully informs Yoshida about Nogami's positive reaction towards the book. However, Yoshida is not convinced. Yoshida has clearly been appointed head of the reality department. Hojo blushes as she remembers the pleasant feeling she got from helping someone and happily skips around. Yoshida watches her carefully because this is the first time Hojo has acted in such a selfless way. So, when Hojo excitedly asks for another book recommendation to help Nogami, Yoshida suggests that she try a different method instead. While Hojo cheerfully thinks about what to do next, Nogami, at home, suddenly feels an uneasy chill and shivers as if something troublesome is about to happen. Later that evening, she wonders how Nogami comes up with ideas for his stories. She imagines him sitting with a fragrant cup of coffee, thoughtfully sipping it while getting inspiration. In her imagination, he passionately types on his keyboard and occasionally pets an expensive Persian cat while working. Yoshida doesn't agree with that, and she scratches her head vigorously to portray that one has to think hard to pull out a story. In reality, Yoshida is right because Nogami is spinning at a 360-degree angle, scratching his head insanely. Later, he lies down dejectedly since he has managed to produce a bare minimum of words related to an average romance idea, but one cannot blame him due to having negligible association with females. A pang of panic strikes him as he imagines Hojo's scornful expression on seeing his pathetic work and then publicly ridiculing him. He instantly decides to throw her an apology for that in advance. So the next day, when he calls her behind the school building, she pretends to be quite engaged, so he hesitantly brings up his current love story endeavors. Apologizing before the crime has even happened is advanced anxiety. She excitedly guesses its completion, but he frantically refuses. She sighs understandably, and he instantly regrets not being honest with her about his inability to produce a decent piece. She indifferently pulls out her phone, intending to let the cat out of the bag in public. Poor Nogami shakes violently as if struck by a lightning bolt. Still, he musters up his courage and finally blurts out about his limitations to write romantic novels. She gazes at him, dumbstruck for a moment, and then, to pressure him, gives him a sinister stare, but this time he remains grounded. Out of frustration, she yells at him for not fulfilling her desire and demands an explanation. Shaking like a leaf, he pulls out an excuse of having minimal interaction with the opposite gender, resulting in indecent, ridiculous work. He terms the current work he has done on that love story as unreadable. Hojo is not convinced and expresses her desire to take a glimpse, but he hysterically refuses to show her his work. To divert her attention, he shifts to blaming his antisocial status, especially with the females. He emphasizes his lack of a practical approach towards romance, hence resulting in a poorly formed love story. For once, brutal self-awareness is doing all the talking. He apologetically requests to withdraw from the project, but Hojo is not ready to give up yet and ponders hard on the matter. Seizing the opportunity, he excitedly suggests a variety of topics on which he is fluent, but Hojo's mind is stuck on Yoshida's earlier advice to help him differently. Meanwhile, Nogami watches her expectantly with a pounding heart, and then suddenly she offers to provide him with the required experience. To his alarm, she offers to become his girlfriend to stir up his romantic chord. Nogami is struck again by a more massive lightning bolt when she proudly states the mutual benefits of her suggestion. She remarks sarcastically at the nasty face he has pulled, but the fact that he and Hojo will be dating is totally indigestible for him. He angrily flaps his arms like a bird trying to confirm every detail. In his confusion, he probes her about the details of their relationship, and that irks her to the core. Flustered, she clarifies that things will be wholesome between them, although both are completely clueless about what that means. Nogami is still in a state of disbelief, but then she gives him a reality check about not letting him go so easily and even threatens him again. Nothing says romance quite like contractual obligations and mild blackmail. She glares at him to seal the deal, and Nogami has no choice but to comply. He feels zombie-like in front of her dominant personality as she self-declares herself as his girlfriend. Even after reaching home, Nogami is quite perturbed as the earlier scenes repeatedly flash in his mind. He is still suspicious of her true motives, but then gives a slight possibility to the fact that she might actually be into him. He unconsciously stares at his reflection, and a plain, freckled face gazes back. In a frenzy, he shuns away that slightest possibility. A feeling of dread creeps into him as he realizes that she might be planning something to embarrass him in the future. She has made him a hand puppet by cleverly grasping his secret because she is already quite infamous for exploiting other people's weaknesses for their own advantage. The miserable boy sulks more and more, and then he abruptly pulls his hair in frustration, trying to guess her real intentions. On the other hand, even Hojo is tossing and turning in a state of hysteria for forcing herself on him. Yoshida watches her stoically and deep down is quite sympathetic towards her impulsive mistress. Hojo becomes more irritable and urges her for a quick solution. Yoshida stays wooden despite Hojo's cranky mood and advises her to become his fully functional girlfriend. Out of abashment, Hojo hides behind the sheets, but Yoshida tries to pull her out, urging her to stay true to her word. Yoshida continues to be the only employee in the common sense department. Hojo is a bit surprised by Yoshida's curt attitude, but a considerate Yoshida doesn't want her to hurt anybody's feelings. She highlights the fact that Hojo was the one who forcibly hooked him into a relationship. She pouts heavily, pointing out that, being an author, he might be having nerves of steel, but Yoshida quickly reminds her that despite everything, he is a regular freshman at high school. Yoshida even suggests undoing the whole mess by handing her the cell phone, but she groans in frustration on learning that Hojo still hasn't been able to acquire his contact number. Yoshida gets super mad and yells at her for being so irresponsible for not getting his contact despite offering herself as his girlfriend. She turns around to leave, making a final comment on his disturbed state of mind, leaving Hojo in shudders. Proposing first and asking for the phone number later is certainly one strategy. Meanwhile, Nogami has become all gaunt and ghastly from overthinking. Not only that, but his regular work is also being affected since he is in a state of mess. So for the second time, he posts an apologetic message on the website for not being able to provide an update. As usual, the message is immediately read by Hojo, whose blood pressure rises instantly. She quickly consults Yoshida, but the latter puts the whole blame on her. Later, when he has finally gathered himself, Nogami decides to decline her offer. Although the whole thing is quite hard to swallow as Hojo's menacing demeanor flashes on his mind, waving her phone threateningly in front of him. He quickly shuns the thought of declining, but then puts his head down in sheer helplessness. The poor lad has lost his own power of decision-making ever since she got hold of his account. But still, he has a teeny-tiny hope of Hojo having true intentions towards him. He recalls her keenness for providing him with a practical experience so that he can produce a love story, although the idea seems quite outlandish to him. Finally, he decides to put the matter off till the next day. This plan has now damaged both the romance and the publishing schedule. The next day, he warily glides towards school, dreading the upcoming moments as he plans to get confirmation about her offer. He decides to meet her after school, although his mind is still echoing with her mocking chuckles. Surprisingly, he runs into her and, as predicted, becomes jittery. Hojo calmly greets him and is curious about his sullen face, even though it is still morning. Seeing Hojo's calm expression, Nogami becomes even more suspicious of her intentions. In reality, however, Hojo is also panicking and keeps remembering Yoshida telling her to apologize. Both are nervous, but Hojo hides it better. She had planned to apologize during lunch, so she is surprised to see him this early. Avoiding eye contact, the two awkwardly stand together until Nogami breaks the silence by asking why she walked to school. Hojo casually says she likes walking and adds that she wants to walk to school with him as a couple. Nogami is left speechless, while Hojo maintains a calm smile despite being shocked by her own words. He seizes the moment and casually tries to confirm their relationship status. Hojo has this itch to cancel everything, but all she manages to blurt out is a jovial affirmation. But now she comes up with an unusual proposal of transforming him into someone up to her standard. In reality, even Hojo is shocked at her bizarre request, but her mouth keeps on blabbering, completely on its own, compelling Nogami to stand by her side from now on to maintain his position. To her horror, all the blood drains out of his face as he stares at her lifelessly. Back at home, she plops herself on the bed out of sheer embarrassment and blames her nervousness for the blunder she had made earlier. Yoshida watches her with great pity. Meanwhile, a gaunt and ghastly Nogami is pushed further into the pits. As usual, Hojo turns to Yoshida for her next step, so Yoshida emphasizes that she has no choice but to date him. The emergency meeting has concluded with exactly the same conclusion. Hojo literally melts away out of embarrassment because she cannot trust herself when in his company. Once again, Yoshida advises her to apologize to him for all her cringeworthy behavior up until now. Yoshida is certain that by now she has acquired his phone number. When Hojo stares at her doofously, she screams at her irritably for not listening to her the day before. Hojo bursts into tears, proclaiming that she didn't have the heart to face him again after acting so shamelessly in the first place. Yoshida slams her forehead in despair and then tells her to be in Nogami's shoes for once. Next, she asks Hojo to analyze her from his perspective, from the moment she threatened him into writing a love story to the point of changing him to her standards. A flustered Hojo realizes the mess she has created despite being his ardent fan, but refuses to admit it in front of him when Yoshida advises her to do so. Nevertheless, Yoshida asks her to go step by step, starting with getting his contact and then clearing all the misunderstandings by keeping clear communication. In response, Hojo hides under her sheets, refusing to let herself out. On the other hand, Nogami confides his woes to his pet rabbit. He is still trying to figure out Hojo's standard, and then a rom-com plot dawns on him about how a hero approaches a heroine and tries to understand her bit by bit. The rabbit remains the most qualified therapist available. His face brightens at the thought that he might have landed on an idea of a love story, but then he rejects the idea, considering the hassle and his current situation. But later that night, his fingers move rhythmically on the keyboard as he furiously brings his idea to life. This is because he wants to get out of the love story-packed clutches as soon as possible. Unfortunately, like any other writer, his mind goes blank in the middle, and he finds himself getting nowhere near success. Then he motivates himself to follow the inspiration he recently received and imagines Houjou as the main protagonist, whose thoughts are incomprehensible. He wonders about her current feelings and activities. A dangerous amount of progress has just occurred by accident. Meanwhile, Houjou is still struggling with Yoshida's idea to exchange contact information with Nogami and desperately probes for other solutions, but Yoshida is adamant and restrains her from getting hyper. The next day, Houjou sets out to fulfill her mission, to apologize and exchange contact info. Like in all rom-coms, she just runs into him, acts surprised, and then exchanges greetings with him. Nogami is as startled as ever, and Houjou remains as calm as a lake, pointing out the misery on his face. But she cannot believe herself, mocking him for standing beside her looking like that. Nogami's shoulders slump further in remorse, and she dares to point that out as well. The apology remains lost somewhere between her thoughts and her mouth. Instead of heartily apologizing, she curtly inquires about his work progress. Deep down, she is aware that his work is being affected by her meddlesome ways, but to her surprise, his face brightens up when he signals some positivity. He hesitantly hints at the loads of work still needed to be done, but he has figured out the main scenario. Houjou's eyes twinkle with emotion as she hysterically squeezes his hand, completely taking him by surprise. A shocked Nogami instantly jolts back, reminding her that he has just struck an idea. With a dazzling smile, Houjou still lauds his effort despite his modesty. She hoped he would have told her sooner, but he had an excuse of not having any means to contact her. Lucky for her, Yoshida's assigned mission is about to be completed as she quickly offers to exchange contact information to keep her notified about the latest progress. As soon as they are done, she quickly checks his status and is surprised to find a bunny as his DP. Later, she rolls on her bed vigorously on completing her task, but Yoshida is not satisfied as Houjou forgot to apologize. She urges her to do so, but the latter is not in the mood. Houjou stares at her cell phone, then mischievously pulls out a random excuse, but Yoshida shuns all her excuses. Now the frustrated princess has never apologized to anyone before, so she seeks Yoshida's help in this regard as well. But Yoshida firmly refuses to help and solemnly emphasizes the importance of clearing his misunderstanding. Now Houjou doesn't want that either, but she also doesn't want to start their official communication with an apology. Yoshida is speechless for a moment, but then, on her probing, advises her to start with something she desires most to tell him. The following night, Nogami is in his blues again when his gaze falls on Houjou's contact on his phone, wondering whether he needs to report his progress to her. He is still gazing aimlessly when suddenly he receives a message from her side, still waiting for some advancement from his side. Nogami cannot believe his eyes. Meanwhile, Houjou is anxious about the appropriateness of her message and digs into Yoshida whether she committed a blunder again under her pressure. She freaks out on discovering that her message has already been read and desperately waits for his response. She gets her breath back when her phone tootles, indicating the response from his side. He has assured her about his leaving no stone unturned to fulfill her request. Houjou stares at the message in a daze, only to be jolted out of it by Yoshida, who pushes her to engage in more lightweight communication. A smile brightens Nogami's face when he receives a cheering message and emoji from her side. For some unknown reason, Nogami is compelled to respond to her and sends a bunny emoji. Houjou is overwhelmed with joy at the things going accordingly when Yoshida reminds her of their alleged relationship and pushes her to fix a date. A flustered Houjou instantly declines her suggestion. Meanwhile, Nogami is still baffled about their so-called relationship. For two people who are supposedly dating, they remain remarkably unconvinced about it. The thought that Houjou's continuously on his troll about making progress is driving him nuts. Daily, he sends her a one-liner revealing zero progress since he is going through writer's block again. He is certain that his incompetence must be quite annoying for her, but he doesn't know that the silly girl goes insane with joy just by his daily reporting and assumes him to be a hard worker. She is ready to wait for his masterpiece for an infinite length, until then pours into his old work. One fateful day, Nogami forgets his textbook at home. At this point, his writing progress and his textbook had apparently agreed to disappear together. Unfortunately, the ferocious English teacher is no person to be toyed with, and to add salt to the wound, it is his turn that day to be picked by the teacher. His friend suggests borrowing a book from someone in the neighboring class. Like a bolt from the blue, Houjou's smirking face flashes in his mind, but he is apprehensive about asking her for a favor. Left with no other options, he reluctantly gives in. In the other class, Hojo's phone begins to ring, making the other plastics stare at her curiously. She is surprised to have received a message from Nogami at that hour, worrying about bad news she might receive. She excuses herself and rushes outside. It appears that he is asking her for the English textbook, and that makes her heart jump with joy on seeing his growing reliance on her. She quickly types an affirmative response for him, keeping in mind Yoshida's strict reprimand to go easy on him. She instantly demands a short story from him in return and scrunches herself in happiness for such charming communication between them. However, after responding to her, Nogami is at unease, and then another demand from her side comes along. Meanwhile, the whole class breaks into curious whispers on seeing Hojo heading their way and are quite surprised at her frequent visits. Nogami is in a fix because he was planning to go to her class. She comes over and hands him the book, which he accepts timidly. The buzz around them gets more intense on seeing her approach Nogami. She flicks her hair and acts all high and mighty for doing him a favor and expects him to literally bow to her for that. She turns to leave, promising to return in the next break, but quite nervously he offers to return the book himself. His best friend appears curious about their relationship, pushing him further into the dilemma, so to cover up, he fabricates a story about their first meeting, but his friend doesn't seem convinced. Also, his friend thinks asking a favor from a girl like her is kinda intimidating. On the other hand, Hojo is going through a fit of hysteria again for acting like a hot air balloon in front of him. She quickly messages Yoshida for help, and this time, the latter sends her an emoji indicating that she has given up on her. Even after Hojo's exit, Nogami is the center of stares and whispers of all his classmates. He can hear his friend telling the same lost and found story to them, but he seems quite uncertain about its validity. Nogami cannot believe the cleverness of today's kids, as they suspect something is cooking between the duo. The classmates were apparently running a full-time investigation unit, but deep down he appreciates her kindness for bringing the book all the way for him. However, Hojo wearily enters her classroom, vowing to act like a human at their next meeting. Her friends are curious about her absence and quite surprised by her interaction with a next-door commoner. Hojo anxiously remembers how her friend Fujiyama despises commoners, but thanks to her another friend who comes to her rescue by terming commoners as quite fun. But Fuji scornfully warns not to engage in any intimate relationship with the commoners, and her coldness strikes Hojo like a lightning bolt. Hojo's other friend is certain that Hojo is just having fun and can never fall into a serious relationship. To Hojo's despair, Fuji also suspects her of hanging around with a commoner during lunch breaks as well. The color drains out of her face, and the misery is written all over her face, raising Fuji's suspicion. The following night, she narrates the whole incident to Yoshida and her fear of being found out. Yoshida feels sorry for her as she is aware of her friends Fujiyama's and Umakuji's open prejudice towards the lower classes, but Yoshida reminds Hojo about how she shared the same thinking until she came along and mended her arrogant ways by constantly criticizing. While serving tea to her, she hopes that even her friends will turn over a new leaf. Yoshida is glad to hear about Hojo lending the book to Nogami, showing improved communication. Hojo excitedly shares his thank you letter but is disappointed by its formal tone. Instantly, Yoshida is doubtful about the way the book was lent to him. Hojo nervously expresses cluelessness, so Yoshida pretends to be Hojo lending someone in her usual arrogant way. Out of embarrassment, Hojo looks away, avoiding her gaze. When even the reenactment is painful, the original performance was probably a disaster. Yoshida warns her again about the hazards of her pompous behavior, and the latter wails helplessly in compliance. And thus begins a long, austere lecture from a very annoyed Yoshida. An abashed Hojo quickly hides behind the tablet screen when she squeals in sheer excitement. It is revealed that Nogami has already returned the favor by uploading a short story. Secretly, Yoshida is quite impressed with Nogami's sincerity and cannot believe that a guy like him is hooked with this selfish brat. The next day, Hojo is devastated because this time she has forgotten her textbook at home. The universe clearly believes in equal opportunity embarrassment. She suddenly remembers Nogami and texts him about the dilemma. He is amused that even the princesses are not perfect. He assures her that he will bring it over. He cannot help noticing that their communication has become so frank. To his alarm, she yearns for yet another short story along with the textbook. Hojo feels slightly guilty for being so pushy, but then she is relieved to receive a casual reply from his side about bringing over the textbook first, since he had already uploaded the story yesterday. For now, she sends a "I am waiting" emoji with beaming eyes. Her friends notice her unusual behavior with curiosity. Hojo spots Nogami peeping in their classroom and quickly steps out. Fuji watches her interact with that same commoner disapprovingly since that has become quite frequent. Meanwhile, Hojo curses herself for acting like a pomp queen again in front of him when she suddenly runs into a solemn-looking Fuji. Her timing remained as impressive as her self-sabotage. Fuji accuses her of gaining quite a proximity with Nogami, and a terror-stricken Hojo frantically denies that. and this time, even Umakuji sides with her and looks equally suspicious. An arrogant Fuji emphasizes the difference between Nogami and their classes and declares him insufficient to reach their standard. Hojo turns to Umakuji for help, but this time even she smells a big fish. Fuji finds it her duty to caution her. Later, a dejected Hojo is sitting all alone, sulking at her friend's attitude. Nothing strengthens a friendship quite like a surprise interrogation. He shudders at the thought that previously, even she belonged to their league, but thankfully, Yoshida pulled her out of that stink. She cannot believe the rotten words they used for him, despite his being an amazing person. Out of the blue, she finds a note written by him in the textbook, indicating her request is being fulfilled. What follows is a hilarious story about a short guy, who makes her reach cloud 9 as she squeals and shakes with sheer joy without realizing that everyone is just staring at her. Meanwhile, Nogami is perturbed about the impact that a meaningful story would leave on her when a message tone echoes from his backpack. A smile breaks on his face as he sees a frolicking emoji sent by her, probably self-created. He is forced to change his opinion about her from a snooty brat to an innocent, expressive person with a softer side. He quickly checks himself for thinking a great deal about her, but then their relationship status flashes in her mind. He quickly jots down a thank you note for her, bringing a beam on her face. Still, she cannot help but wonder about her effectiveness in expressing digitally and ends up messing up on his face. When a thought strikes her about spending more time with him, she slams her head down in sheer embarrassment, much to everyone's inquisitiveness. Later, Nogami is fretting over the fact of getting his book back when she notifies him of doing that herself. At this rate, the desk was becoming the real victim. Panic-stricken about catching unnecessary attention, he quickly decides to get it himself and notifies her. But Hojo is afraid of being judged by two other snooty queens, so on mutual stand they both decide to meet in the corridor. While returning the book, she criticizes him for having an unmarked book and emphasizes the importance of taking notes. A crowd begins to gather around them, awarding them with suspicious stares, so the duo decides to part ways. It then strikes Hojo that she ended up being a hot air balloon again instead of expressing gratitude. So she quickly sends him a message and is again forced to ponder her ineffectiveness during face-to-face conversations. Digital Hojo and real-life Hojo were clearly operating under different management. Even Nogami is left baffled about her having split personalities after receiving that message. Later, when Hojo confides in Yoshida about the issue, the latter explains that her dominating style is deep-rooted, and practically, there is nothing that can be done. But on constant nagging from Hojo's side, she suggests the duo go out for a meal. When Hojo tries to protest, Yoshida emphasizes that it is the best way to increase frankness between the duo. Hojo is still confused, but Yoshida quickly grabs her phone and texts Nogami on her behalf, inviting him to dinner the next day. Poor Nogami is left in a stupor, while Hojo can be seen going berserk, unable to be controlled by Yoshida. Although Nogami is shocked, he still knows that he has no option but to decline. He tries to convince himself of their blossoming relationship, but then fumes as all the cringeworthy and embarrassing stuff flashes in his mind. He tries to ward off those negative thoughts and realizes that he is always uptight around Hojo while she remains calm. Meanwhile, Hojo is compelled by Yoshida to practice all the mushy stuff specific to romantic couples on a date, but at some point she even becomes hysterical out of sheer embarrassment. Hojo is in a fix again, worrying about the whole new experience ahead. Yoshida advises her to act normally just like couples do, even making out, because nothing says normal date like a live-action panic drill. Now this creeps her out completely as she quickly dives into her sheets again. Next, she orders Yoshida to keep trailing her the next day from a distance, since even Yoshida is enrolled as a third-year student at their school to monitor Hojo. Yoshida agrees to render her whole support to her. Next, Yoshida is all set to plan a foolproof date for Hojo. Similarly, even Nogami anxiously researches the whole date idea on the internet and finds nothing substantial on that topic. Finally, the lunch break of the big day arrives, and he frantically climbs upstairs to the roof, being a little late. He looks here and there, but there is no sign of her. Soon, she calls out to him, pouting at his slackness. Smiling nervously, he tries to explain, but she is in no mood to take any excuses from him. Already short of time, she curtly leads him while he timidly follows her. Deep down, she is embarrassed for being a little harsh on him, but the jitteriness got the better of her. She recalls how Yoshida had schooled her to be kind and friendly on her first date, because who doesn't want a performance review before a meal? Meanwhile, Yoshida peeks out from a bush and is disappointed at her mistress's unchanged ways. She quickly messages Hojo to thank him for accepting her sudden invite and shows a brightened mood. Hojo quickly complies and thanks him with a beam. Nogami is startled at her abrupt mood change, while Hojo is thankful to Yoshida for saving her face, but Yoshida doesn't seem very pleased at her dependence. Soon, the duo settles on a table reserved for them and Hojo pulls out her bento. Unconsciously, his gaze falls on her, and he becomes lost in his thoughts. He cannot help but notice that her bento seems quite average for her standard, as he was expecting a more luxurious one. She proudly mentions Yoshida, who especially prepares her bento every day. He is quite unaware that she is secretly keeping an eye on them, but he praises her effort. Yoshida is awed by his amazing insight. Hojo can see Yoshida from her place, and even more so, her annoying smirk is clearly visible to her. Next, Hojo praises his delicious-looking bento and is surprised that he makes them himself. Clearly, cooking is now a competitive spectator sport. Hojo awkwardly reacts, suddenly leaning in close and pressing him for clarification. When Nogami mentions that cooking is a basic life skill even for boys, her mood drops and she slumps back, feeling useless and dependent on others. Yoshida quickly steps in, sensing trouble, and signals Hojo to calm down. Hojo then praises Nogami's cooking skills to steady herself, while Nogami feels guilty for hurting her feelings. Following Yoshida's advice, Hojo suggests they share food to build their relationship. Nogami is unsure, but Hojo cheerfully encourages him, clearly acting under Yoshida's guidance. He hesitantly offers his bento to her, and the latter chooses the rolled omelette. Instantly, Yoshida signals her to present her master act. At first, Hojo is perplexed, but then she musters up her courage and opens her mouth wide. Nogami is paralyzed with horror, and the latter keeps on widening the opening more. When he still doesn't pick up the hint, Hojo gets ferocious enough to swallow him alive. Yoshida is anxious because Hojo mistakenly picked the wrong signal and went too far. On top of that, Hojo had reprimanded Nogami for being a scaredy cat, just to cover up the blunder. While Yoshida is still fretting, she is discovered by two of her classmates and is invited over for lunch. As she is forcibly taken away, Hojo hysterically yells after her. In fact, she appears quite irritable for relying on her too much. Dejectedly, she slumps down while Nogami anxiously looks upon her. Because if embarrassment were a sport, she'd already have a gold medal. He is really worried about her sudden mood change and feels that time as well as food are quickly running out. He decides to take matters into his own hands and begins with small general queries. To play safe, he wonders about her favorite animal and mentions that he likes rabbits a lot. His tactic works since she thoughtfully declares all the marine creatures her favorite. The conversation picks up momentum as he inquires about her frequent aquarium trips. He forgot that he was talking to a rich brat whose father has the capacity to construct a private aquarium for her, because nothing says normal childhood like owning your own Nemo habitat. As expected, he is left dumbstruck, but Hojo seems to be fully charged and presses him for further queries. In his daze, he inquires about her favorite book. Hojo is in a fix because she loves many books, and begins to pressure her mind to name only one. Seeing her confused, he gives her the liberty to name several, but after a while she tries to narrow down to 2 books. She names those masterpieces, but then cannot help listing down a few more. He guesses her preference to be for foreign literature, but she clarifies reading them during her primary years. Nogami is impressed by her knowledge of books. Just to gain knowledge, he probes her about the flying classroom. In response, her expression turns intimidating as she condemns him for forgetting the story and then offers to lend a copy to him. But after a while, she curses herself for being too uptight for nothing. He musters up the courage and finally queries her about something bothering him for some time. He cannot believe that an avid book lover like her wants to read his written love story. Hojo is shocked to learn that he holds himself in such low self-esteem. She mentions how she is impressed by his clearly expressed negative emotions in a fun and cheerful way. Nogami is flushed at the compliment and humbly expresses his gratitude. Meanwhile, Hojo cannot believe that she finally blurted out her true feelings about his work. Deep down, Nogami is on cloud 9 about learning her virtuous intentions, while Hojo is panic-stricken, and to hide her embarrassment, she yells at him to remark on something about her. Nogami is bewildered, while Hojo cannot believe her own narcissism, because nothing says modesty like yelling for compliments mid-date. Nevertheless, she keeps on pressing him, but he is unable to respond so spontaneously. Quite generously, she grants him 5 minutes to think, but he excuses himself from commenting on her personality, considering himself unworthy of that. She sighs at his self-esteem being once again in the pits and declares him a genius writer. She reminds him of their relationship status and urges him to be more open and close to each other. There is a bout of awkward silence after her moving speech, and overcoming his jitteriness, he finally agrees with her. A blushing Hojo becomes all high and mighty again and grants him a favor to be closer to her. Poor Nogami is shocked at the sharp U-turn in her personality change, but thankfully, Yoshida's considerate face pops again from the bushes to mend Hojo's insane blunders. She creates a sign starting from home, so Hojo misreads it and impulsively invites him to her house. But in reality, Yoshida wanted her to ask for his home telephone number. But the wrong is already done, and Hojo has no choice but to go with the flow. The following night, Hojo blames Yoshida for creating a mess and abandoning her in the middle. What follows is a nasty brawl between the two. To pacify the situation, Yoshida inquires about the time they spent in her absence. Slowly, she narrates the whole conversation and then tosses and turns in hysteria. Meanwhile, a fretful Nogami is searching the internet for advanced relationship advice, but to his annoyance he finds nothing and throws a tantrum. Google clearly failed its primary function, giving dating life hacks to clueless boys. Hojo is running here and there in a frenzy because just after a couple of days, Nogami is due at her place as a result of a mishap that happened during lunchtime earlier. Yoshida keeps on teasing her, and Hojo, in a fit of panic, hides beneath the sheets. She shakes Yoshida wildly for advice, and the latter assures her to do normal couple things in her room. Hojo shudders at the thought of being alone with him in her room, and an intimate image flashes before her eyes. Yoshida has other ideas like movies or games, but seeing Hojo exhausted, she realizes Hojo is focused on helping Nogami. She reminds Hojo that their romantic plan is based on helping him write a novel. Yoshida opens a hidden wall filled with books and tells Hojo to talk to Nogami about books and his interests. She even suggests asking subtle questions about his work, but Hojo refuses. The next day, Nogami nervously agrees to visit Hojo's house on Sunday, already feeling uneasy. He imagines being questioned harshly by serious men in black people once he arrives. Here, Cozy Sunday is like an interrogation team waiting at the door. He expresses hesitation about this whole plan, and on seeing her startled expression, explains being nervous and low on conversation skills. In response, she intimidatingly flashes his account in front of his eyes to prove they have a lot to talk about. To her delight, he instantly agrees, and she takes an exit as the bell rings. Poor Nogami is left in hot water and ponders the authenticity of her statements. Meanwhile, Hojo moves merrily since she had already planned with Yoshida about the things she would discuss with him. She is all set to seize the opportunity to grill him as much as possible. Ironically, the purpose of her flashing the screen in front of him was not to intimidate him, but to prove that they would be talking about his novels. In her euphoric state, she analyzes how she has progressed from a spoiled rich brat to an angel. In her merriment, she spins and frolics, attracting many curious stares. Coming back to Nogami, it is revealed that the past 2 weeks have been quite eventful for him. From being forced to write a love story for Hojo to being suddenly invited to her place, he is so overwhelmed that he desperately needs someone to confide in, but he lies dejectedly, having no one to talk to since he is afraid that his secret might get leaked. Tired and hungry, he decides to go out to have a meal, and then suddenly runs into Shida-sensei, a teacher from his cram school during his middle years. Even the teacher is shocked to see him since it has been a while since he left school. After some preliminary conversation, it appears that even she is aware of his passion. Now this comes as a shocker for him, but she reveals that she was aware of his writing in secret. From his long face, she guesses that he has some trouble with novel writing. When he denies, she jumps to the next option of girl trouble. When he remains silent, she causally figures out his obsession with print waifus. Clearly, novels and fictional crushes are more concerning than actual human interaction. But the real shocker comes to her when it is uncovered that the girl is a 3D human. The teacher shakes him wildly out of an emotional outburst while he stares at her miserably. But then Shida encourages him to confide in her, but he is quite reluctant. Then it occurs to her that she might be the right person to seek advice from since she is older, and they have no common acquaintance, including Hojo. But then the strong smell of booze reeking from her changes his mind. He condemns himself for thinking of confiding in a drunkard. When she presses him too much, he is reluctantly forced to narrate the whole situation to her. He wonders whether it is appropriate to visit Hojo's place. Out of the blue, she blurts out with a wink about Hojo's alleged affinity towards him. Suddenly, Hojo's fierce demeanor flashes in his mind, and he completely denies her theory. Shida gives several reasons to support her theory, but a frustrated Nogami decides to leave. On the other hand, Hojo is still in her jovial mood at home, igniting Yoshida's curiosity. Hojo narrates the whole scene, including her alleged generosity of flashing his account in front of him, to suggest discussion topics. A shocked Yoshida clarifies that she might have unconsciously threatened to leak his account if he failed to visit her place. To prove her point, she makes Hojo relive the whole scene in front of the mirror. Hojo goes insane with hysteria upon creating a fresh blunder. She begins to make excuses when Yoshida firmly tells her to apologize. Hojo has a faint hope that he might have grasped her true intention, but Yoshida is not so sure. Still, the lazybones procrastinates the whole apology thing until the time of his visit, because nothing motivates like public humiliation rehearsal in front of your own reflection. She tries to push Hojo by mentioning that if she can't do it on the phone, then it is impossible to apologize in person. But Hojo doesn't have the courage and stays grounded in her decision. When Yoshida pushes her more, Hojo becomes furious at her for crossing her limits. But this time, Yoshida doesn't back off and fights back, claiming that the timing is very important. What follows is a girlish boxing match between the duo. Yoshida has pushed her so much that even Hojo doubts her own guts and capabilities. Meanwhile, Nogami is still stuck with Shida at the restaurant, who keeps asking obnoxious questions. A frustrated Nogami stands up to leave, thanking her for the meal. Shida tries to lure him by offering more advice, but he refuses to accept some drunkard's lame wisdom. Shida is offended by his coldness but remains steady, willing to offer him sober advice. For that, she even shares her QR code that Nogami reluctantly accepts, and while leaving sullenly, he decides to never call her. Even while walking back home, his mind is still occupied when suddenly Shida's words about Hojo's fondness for him echo. He quickly quiets that voice. Finally, Sunday arrives, and Hojo is anxiously waiting for Nogami to arrive.
Here I am, know it's been